So let's begin updates on the war front. US President Donald Trump has said that Washington is very close when it comes to closing on a deal with Iran to end the ongoing conflict, further claiming that Tehran has agreed to hand over its stockpile of enriched uranium. Speaking to the reporters at the White House, Trump says that we are very close in making a deal with Iran and making sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, and they have agreed to that. They have agreed to almost everything, is something that President Trump has been saying. Referring to the uranium stockpile, Trump says that they've agreed to give us back the nuclear dust, and his term for enriched uranium that the US says could be built to make nuclear weapons.
The big thing we have to do is we have to make sure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, because if they do, you want to talk about problems, you'd have problems. So very important is that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, and they've agreed to that. Iran's agreed to that, and they've agreed to it very powerfully. They've agreed to give us back the nuclear dust that's way underground because of the attack we made with the B-2 bombers. So we have a lot of agreement with Iran, and I think something's going to happen very positive.
Now let's get to the Iranian point of view here, because Iran is now rejecting what President Trump has been saying and on the claims of a nuclear breakthrough, dismissing them to be as baseless. Tehran has categorically denied having any agreement to hand over enriched uranium, contradicting President Trump's assertion of a near-final deal. Iranian officials, however, have made it clear that there has been no talks on any uranium transfer, rejecting the very premise of the US president's claim. And this is a sharp rebuttal coming in from Tehran's side, which is called Trump's statement to be a lie, signaling deep mistrust between the two sides. Let's get connected with Mayank on this. Mayank, good morning. Again, here is President Trump seems to be leading with the statements there before anything officially that has now happened. And now what do we expect from both sides when both sides are expected to meet again for a second round of talks?
See, nuclear is something on which the entire talk has been hinging upon, right now at least. And, excuse me, the clarity was given by J.D. Vance, Vice President, while he was leaving, and the talks had not succeeded in Islamabad, because the essence of his talk hinged upon nuclear aspect only. But whereas, let me remind our viewers and take them back to 2015, when the similar kinds of talks were happening, and they had in one way or the other succeeded in the term that even during that time, Russia had proposed that they were ready and they had technology to store the enriched uranium, because it is up to the percentage of uranium which decides whether that will be weapon grade or for peaceful purposes, and which can be for medical purposes. So what I'm trying to bring out is that it has been a discussion which is going on since decades and long time. But now the Americans, the US and even Iran, they have hinged their entire talk and discussion on that only, and we have to see to what middle ground do they come.
Yes.
Because ultimately the entire success, the success of the ceasefire and the kind of operations which are happening in Middle East, which had encompassed the whole globe, will depend upon them. One important point which we need to see, whether Iran is ready to give its bargaining chip, and in what way, in which way is it going to give, because there has to a room, or the proposals have to be so attractive for Iran also, so that they
exactly. Then what is Iran getting in return? I mean, that will also be a point of contention there, because it is not just about uranium enrichment. It is also about the Strait of Hormuz. That has also been one of the issues, the sticking point there when it comes to disagreement from both sides. So red line versus red line, statement versus statement. The war of words, however, continues. Let's take a look what President Trump has been saying. Stop the uranium enrichment. That straight away seems to be a message for Iran. However, Iran is of the opinion that they have a right to enrich. Now, Lebanon front is something that US and Israel both have maintained that they are not part of the truce. However, Iran has been insisting as a precondition to the first round of talks which failed in Islamabad that Lebanon needs to be made part of the ceasefire deal. Sanctions and assets. US says that the stance is on the relief, which is still unclear. But this has been one of the 10-point demands that Tehran has been keeping forth as far as removal of US sanctions, all of them. Then the Strait of Hormuz standoff. Open the strait. Multiple times that President Trump has given the directions to Iran. What has Iran done? Well, says it is ours to control, and in fact ours to also monetize every passing ship. So that seems to be the sticking point, that what now we are looking at, as President Trump, however, continues to say and announce that Israel and Lebanon, however, have agreed to a 10-day ceasefire. This is the other round of the conflict that we are looking at, where President Trump has asserted that he will invite the Israeli Prime Minister and the Lebanese President to White House for a meeting very soon. And the first meaningful talks that have happened since decades that we are looking at, where he says that both sides wanted peace, which he believes will happen very soon.
Will Hezbollah stick to the ceasefire? Are you confident about that?
I think they will. I think it's going to be, actually, it's very exciting because it's 48 years. We're going to be meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, as you know, and the president of Lebanon. And I had a great talk with both of them today. They're going to be having a ceasefire, and that'll include Hezbollah. And I think it could be number 10 for me.
Now, as far as despite when it comes to the ceasefire announcement, Israel has been striking. As far as the violation that has now been reported within minutes, and the attacks continue on the southern part of Lebanon, where there have been reports of artillery fire, and that has been reported under heavy shelling. And this seems to be, as far as the point of view, where both sides, according to President Trump, have agreed for a ceasefire. But then why are we hearing and getting such reports coming in from southern part of Lebanon, which is a Hezbollah stronghold? Not just in Lebanon, sirens are also blaring in northern Israel. So that seems to be the counter reaction. Just few hours after the ceasefire that came into effect, this seems to be the ground situation that is now being reported. So northern part of Israel is something that Hezbollah has been aiming when it comes to its counter-attacks on the Israeli side. So both sides have been continuing as far as their attacks are concerned. And this seems to be the situation on ground that what we are now looking at, because not just in Lebanon, sirens are also blaring in northern Israel, just few hours after the ceasefire that has now come into effect. Now, what is being said that both sides, however, when we speak of Israel and Lebanon, have agreed for a ceasefire, a 10-day ceasefire, and this time the U.S. was playing a host. But when it comes to the representatives of both of the countries who were in Washington to hold the peace talks there, they are of the opinion that immediate breakthrough is something which is not possible. Lastly, when we speak of several of those decades that these countries have not directly communicated, well, immediate breakthrough is not an option. But however, there will be several rounds of peace talks there. So looking at the ground situation, what are we now looking at, especially when it comes to areas there, which is in southern part of Lebanon, that continues to be hit on part of Israeli side. Southern Lebanon is mainly when it comes to the areas where there is a Hezbollah stronghold. Let's connect with Srinjoy on this. Srinjoy, good morning. Hezbollah did not want Lebanon to hold talks with Israel. Now a 10-day ceasefire announcement has come. Both the president of Lebanon and Israeli Prime Minister are also expected to meet in the United States, but there is already a ceasefire violation being reported.
Yes, first of all, the fact that the two countries have agreed is a step forward, and that is a positive sign. Even a small step in these difficult times is a positive sign. There's no dispute about that. The fact that both sides have met after 40 years plus, and that is something that has to be lauded. But the question is, can Lebanon handle the Hezbollah? Because the Hezbollah has a mind of its own. And the mind of its own, the mind is also controlled by Iran. So that's really the question. Can Lebanon tell the Hezbollah, persuade the Hezbollah, force the Hezbollah, or whatever, to ensure that the Hezbollah ceases to fight? Now, if the Hezbollah continues to fire at parts of northern Israel, Israel is going to hit back. And once Israel hits back, there will be huge casualties on the Lebanese side. Now, that is the worry. And that is what has been happening for weeks and months and years. This problem has to be solved. And what is essential is the Hezbollah stopping its attacks on Israel, and the Lebanese government managing to persuade the Hezbollah to do so.
Yes.
The question is, can Lebanon do it? That's really the big question.
Well, that seems to be the call, because President Trump has been saying that both sides want peace, so does Lebanon. But as far as when it comes to this meeting that is expected to take place in Washington, will there be an immediate breakthrough as far as a lasting ceasefire? Because that remains to be seen, because already violations have been reported. Let's in the meantime talk about these call logs, because there has been a lot of pressure that has been building up even on Lebanon. Because calling out on Hezbollah, there has been a drastic change that one we are looking at as far as when it comes to the involvement of Hezbollah in its politics is concerned. Now let's take a look. You know, when it comes to the pressure that has been building, Trump and Netanyahu have been holding tense conversations and talk or risk. That seems to be the U.S., however, declaring a ceasefire unilaterally. So is this up to the United States of America here, because it seems to be playing the role of a mediator? Then there seems to be a strategic pushback as well. Netanyahu wanted to keep Lebanon out of the ceasefire because he wanted, as far as when it comes to the ceasefire that has been announced with Iran, well, Lebanon should not be a part of it. And this is something that the US also has been maintaining. Then the turning point came. Final round of calls seals the shift towards talks with Lebanon. And that is where, when it comes to the representatives to the United States, when we talk about Israel and Lebanon, they met in Washington, and it was under Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, where we are looking at a certain positive outcome, where President Trump has announced that there is going to be a 10-day ceasefire at least, and the leaders of Lebanon and Israel will be also meeting in Washington in the coming few days. Let's in the meantime also talk about what President Trump has been saying, because he's been urging Iran-backed Hezbollah to abide by the ceasefire with Israel that has now come into effect. And this is now coming across hours after where there have been reports of ceasefire violation as well. But if Iran comes here in the picture, because Iran has also been the one that has been asking or looking for a shield or a protection for its proxy there, which it refers to as resistant fighters. But here, Donald Trump has now been urging Hezbollah as well to abide by the ceasefire with Israel that has now come into effect. That remains the top focus that we are now looking at, especially when it comes to lasting ceasefire and peace, is something that President Trump is also looking at in this other part of the conflict in the Middle East.
Will Hezbollah stick to the ceasefire? Are you confident about that?
I think they will. I think it's going to be, actually, it's very exciting because it's 48 years. We're going to be meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, as you know, and the president of Lebanon. And I had a great talk with both of them today. They're going to be having a ceasefire, and that'll include Hezbollah. And I think it could be number 10 for me.
Well, let's get you a breaking update that is now coming in, where Trump says that Iran war end game seems to be now nearing. However, he seems to be contradicting with this warning where Pete Hegseth, who's the war minister there, who has come out to say that the U.S. military is already locked and loaded and they're ready to hit power plants and energy infrastructure. Because Hegseth here seems to be warning that Iran would rather choose wisely exactly if they want to continue with the ceasefire or they want to face the consequences. Well, Mayank, that is something, the tone that President Trump has also been taking, because he says that he pulled up the stakes, then it will take at least 20 years for Iran to rebuild.
See, there are two words which have been profusely used, but practically they did not have the real meaning on ground, actually. Ceasefire and deadline. I mean, these things. And in this case, when such high stakes talks are there, and the scare becomes part of it, actually. Scare and cajoling or nudging someone. This remains a very high stake talk wherein a war has taken place. So both sides are making postures, and they are trying to eke out the maximum out of the talks by creating an atmosphere for themselves. So it is also environment shaping in a way which is going on right now from every side, that yes, our fingers are on the trigger, we are ready for the war. And these are the ways by which they are shaping the environment, that yes, we'll be ready, but let us talk. And when they talk, then it is as depending on these kinds of pressures, they eke out the maximum from the space there. So this is what exactly is going on. But then if you saw, this Middle East operation had created ripples all across the globe. And it remains, everyone still watching on this aspect, because it is creating problems as far as in multiple ways, which not only includes energy security, but it is now trickling down to multiple ways, and like fertilizers, agriculture aspect is there. Cost of living is the one which is going to be hit maximum, or it is going to increase. So from the words which are coming out, there has to be in between the line reading which is going on right now. Because Iran had been multiple times saying that they won't be part of the talk, but then they came ultimately for the talk. US has been saying that operations are over, but then you saw that operations continued for more than 40 days.
Yes.
This is what exactly is happening right now.
Well,
also,
that is President Trump and a classic way of unpredictability, because there has been a lot of back and forth, and uncertainty, however, still prevails. Exactly, we don't know what he's going to say or do next. So that seems to be, as far as President Trump's nature here is concerned. But here, if the talks have been happening and if the second round of talks also happen very soon, well, will there be a lasting ceasefire? Because 21st of April is the day when the previous ceasefire that has been announced by President Trump will now come to an end. Please do stay on with us, Mayank. Let's talk about